Welcome back everybody to another Paul's project where we are doing a full restoration on a Vauxhall Corsa, but this one's a bit different. It's got a 2-litre turbo engine in it. So if you remember, this Corsa is owned by Dream Car Giveaways. They sent it to me for a little cleanup, but the more I got into it, the more problems I found. So where do we start on this? Both sills and both rear arches have got rusty holes in them. The suspension front and rear is covered in corrosion. The brake pipes are a mess and the original steel ones on there are all corroded too. The exhaust is touching the body most of the way down and looks a bit of a mess. The wiring has been run all over the place and it's also loose. The engine and the gearbox is both hammering out oil, and the paintwork at the front is covered in stone chips and it needs a lot of work elsewhere. So from a distance, this Corsa looked amazing, but when you got up close, you could just see all these little problems. So I phoned up Dream Car Giveaway and I said, look, it's a lot more than what we first thought. It needs a full pull apart restoration. And they said, just do it. As long as we get back a totally mint Corsa, go for it. And I was like, mint. So why am I still stood here chatting? Let's get on this Corsa. Let's rip this thing apart. Let's go. So the best way to do a restoration is just remove as much as you can. This way you get to clean up everything before it goes back on. So first off, we take the interior out, like the seats and the door cards, and then we can get all the panel work off. The doors, the boot, the lights and the bumpers. So now we're getting closer into the car. I can tell this car has been built right. Nothing's been left loose, and bonus, all the bolts are there, there's none missing. I think the main problem with this car is its age. All those winters driving on the UK roads with the salt has just corroded everything underneath. Also, all the rubbers have perished, which has fired grease all up the engine bay and down the underside of the car. Another thing I noticed while I was stripping the Corsa is that the turbo's knackered. So I took the intercooler off, and when I put it on its side, oil poured out of the intercooler, as well as if we look in here, the downpipe has had a lot of oil going in it. So this is definitely something we need to send off to get reconditioned. Right, now the car's all stripped, we need to get it on the spit. I've had this about 7 or 8 years. It's done loads of projects, been used and abused, but still works mint. Now the engine's out and it's up in the air, you can just see how much grease has fired up this bulkhead. Both drive shaft boots and the rack boots were split, so it's going to take some serious jet washing to get this off. Luckily for me, the mower place next door has got a really high powered jet wash. So TFR all over that grease, all down the underside. We're going to jet wash that grease off the engine bay, spin it on its side, and then carefully go down all the underside. The more I get off it now, the easier my next job is going to be, which is the most joyful, time-consuming job of wire wheeling all that old underseal off from underneath. It's a right pain, but it needs to be done. It takes days to do this properly. Get in all the nooks and crannies, under all the wheel arches, and just get it all off so I can see what's lurking underneath. And looking at it, this Corsa isn't bad at all. I've seen a lot of rotten Corsas over the years, but this looks like it's definitely not one of them. And there we go, just have a look at all that stuff that I've got off it, all the underseal. We nearly got a full box full. So a lot of people ask why I do that. Basically, especially in this case, it looks all right, you give it a scrape and there's a big hole underneath it. We now got 2 extra holes in the front floor pans, which we got to weld up, and I think it's possibly because of this over here. So it looks like the car from factory, I suppose, had air conditioning fitted, and somebody's just left the big gaping hole there for where the old aircon pipes used to go in. So that is what's caused our rot on the floor. Also with the jet wash, we've got some filler that's coming away. So I've got to get all that off too. So we'll start at the front with our welding and work back. So first I'm just going to weld in a plate flush where that air conditioning hole was. Job's a good one, all ready for the bodywork to be done. Then the other welding's mega easy, 2 plates in the floor, get the rear seals and arches done. Then it's time for a bit of a clean up and the shell's off down to the body shop. So while our shell's off to the body shop to be painted, we've got to get all our parts sorted, ready for when it gets back, we can chuck them straight on. Engine, it's about time we sort all these oil leaks out. Also, we've got bolts loose, we've got bolts that are broken around the front, we've got bolts that are missing. So this needs a proper go through to make sure it's super reliable. First, we're going to lift it up on the crane so we can get to the gearbox. The gearbox is covered in grease, really dirty and horrible. So we're going to split that off, save that for a clean up later on. I'm going to do the rear main crank seal, the oil seal. So we're going to get the clutch and the flywheel off as well. Then I've got our engine stand, which makes it a lot easier to turn the engine upside down to do the sump and stuff. So that's all bolted on, and then the engine's sat there nice. Then while I'm taking off all the accessories to the engine, I've noticed that there's bolts missing out the alternator, there's bolts missing out the inlet manifold, and also there's other bolts that are in there, but they've been cross-threaded. So a lot of this we're going to chuck away and put new bolts in. And then once all that stuff's off, we're down to our bare block and head. So we know a lot of the oil leak was coming out of the breather pipe where that bolt was missing. It just weren't even clamped down. I mean, it's a big hole, it's just open straight to the crank. The other bit is, have a look at those. 2 nasty, horrible bolts. Obviously they've cross-threaded it and there's no threads in there, but they're not even clamping down that side of the sump. So that's why our sump's leaking. Also looking up a bit, you can see that water pump. Just look at the state of that. That's obviously dripping down coolant onto our oil leak, just making it even worse. So I've got a new water pump, tensioner kit, cam belt, full engine gasket set. Let's continue with our rebuild. Let's go. So continuing to strip down this engine, I just keep finding more and more missing bolts. They just ain't even there. No wonder this thing hammered out oil. On this car, looking at the history, it's got a Cometic race head gasket on, so I'm not going to be changing that because it didn't leak and it ran fine before. So taking that old cam belt kit and water pump off, flipping it over, getting that sump off and getting the oil pump, and then our engine's stripped down to its bare bones, ready for the rebuild. I put a new coat of high temperature black on the block and then start fitting the oil pump. The sump gasket on this has a built-in baffle. I've put a new one on and I'm going to put all the correct bolts in it. Then we're putting our new water pump on and the cam belt kit with the tensioner and all the rollers. Then inlet manifold, all the rest of the bits. And then our engine's pretty much rebuilt. I've took the cam cover off and the timing cover. That's been sent off with the body to the paint shop. So I'm going to get it color coded to the car. It's going to look mint. All new gaskets, apart from that head gasket. So hopefully this engine is going to be leak free. I'm going to continue now with the gearbox and all the rest of the parts, getting them black. And yeah, we'll start the spinning clock and hopefully by the time it's finished, our body will be back as if by magic. Sound. And there we go. We've got a rot-free, totally solid, mintly painted Corsa B. So my mate Alistair, he works full-time in the daytime painting cars. He's been coming for a couple of hours each night to the Odd Autos body shop and he's painted this for me. Doing it that way, it's taken a bit longer, but he's only charged me for a full respray, including materials, £2,500. You just can't moan at that for the job he's done. He's gone round each seam and resealed it, stone guarded the underside. He's done the engine bay and the outside, and well, it's still on the spit. So that means all the parts I put on it are going to stay nice and clean because it doesn't have to go back down the body shop to have more work done. I've had new glass fitted, so we're ready to build it back up. We had a couple of problems with the seals, I'll show you. So if you remember when the car first come to me, one of the jacking covers was missing. Now, Alistair's missus, she comes in and helps prep. She's prepped this up ready, but still trying to find a cover. When you do find them, they're about £200 just for that stupid cover. So with my limited, and I say limited, CAD design knowledge, I've managed to do that, which I'm quite chuffed with. Printed it out, took 11 hours I think it was, and just pops on there. Job's a good one. I'll get this down to Alistair so he can carry on painting, and it's time to start putting our Corsa back together. So let's go. So starting with the wire and loom in the car, I'm going to run it back through the bulkhead and all round the front engine bay nicely. If you remember the engine wire and loom before, it used to come across the top of the strut top, looked awful, but this time I've widened up the hole where the servo pipe goes through and threaded it through there nice. So the brake pipes, the old ones were steel, they were proper rusty, they just looked awful, so I'm changing them for copper. This means they look good and it will last forever. Now the steering rack, I'm stripping it down because I want to paint it, and those rack boots are split. And when I was taking the track rod ends off, I took the offside track rod end off and it had 10.5 turns to get it off. And then when I took the near side track rod end off, have a look at that. It was only on 1.5 turns. How dangerous is that? So after that, I cleaned it up, painted it, put new rack boots on and made sure those track rod ends went on nice and even, and then fitted it to the car. After that, it's up in the air and fitting our fuel tank. Now the fuel tank had quite a few scratches on it, so what I've done is wrapped it so it's made it pretty much bulletproof. That gets clipped up, all the fuel lines are cleaned and they're clipped onto. Now this ramp for building up cars is real good. There's no posts in the way, so you can get to all the doors easy and stuff like that, but it's very balanced. So if I stick the engine in next, the car just tips forward off the ramp. So we've got to get the weight in the center first before we can fit that engine. So it's time to fit this interior. The carpet, gave it a good hoover and fitted that. And then we're into interior trims, the rear cards, and then we get them rear seats in. The front seats I got repaired because they had rips in. Give them a good clean as well, and they're fitted in there nice. Doors up next. Lucky I'm a big strong boy, I can actually hang the door on my own. It's just 2 pins on this. No adjustment, pops straight on. And with the windows and all the interior in, that's the doors done too. Going around the back, I got the boot on, cleaned and painted up that rear crash bar, and then fitted the bumper. The lights go on, and then the back end's starting to look like a car. And then coming back around the front to save time, before I took the wings off, I marked where they go. So there's going to be no mucking around, fitting this, and it goes straight on. Then back up in the air to mount the rear axle. I've cleaned up and painted it, and all the springs, the shocks, and it's having new handbrake cables and brakes too. And then I think that's enough weight in the back so we can start fitting our engine. I'm getting quite excited now. It looks like a Corsa again, which is good, and the NEC is only 3 days away now. So got to pull my finger out. Let's get this engine in, shall we? Let's go. This engine looks proper mint now, it's all cleaned up. It's a massive engine going in a tight space, so I've got to be careful when I'm lifting this in. So all I'm going to do is bring it underneath on the trolley and then lower the body down to it. Then with the engine crane, jack it up, have a bit of a mess around getting the mounts in because it is tight in there, and then boom, it's in. Job's a good one. So if you remember the turbo, I sent it off to our local place called Midland Turbos. They rung me back the next day and said it was absolutely knackered. So not only the bearings and the oil seals had gone, the exhaust and the inlet casing was totally cracked. So basically it's a throw in the bin job, and they had to build a new turbo up to match the old one. So I built that back up with all the Samco hoses and the oil feeds, and then put it back on the car. Next up, I got that cam cover back from Alistair. He's done an absolutely fabulous job. It's exactly the same as the body colour. That looks amazing. And then it's starting to look even more like a mint Corsa. So what's the time now? It's 6 o'clock. So it's Tuesday, it's 6 o'clock. I'm gonna try and upload this video now so it's out for 7. Dream car giveaways are coming with the trailer at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to shuttle it up to the NEC. So I've got a lot of work left to do tonight. I've managed to stick brakes on, side skirts and other stuff like that, but I've got to make an exhaust jet, complete front to back stainless. That usually takes a fair few hours. I'm using the Profusion exhaust like I usually do. It's going to be a twin box system. We're going down to a 2.5 inch instead of the 3 inch, which only had one box. I always like a turbo car to sound like it's spitting on you. So as it comes by, it's like, and then, you know, excellent sounding for a turbo car. Other stuff I've got to do, the rad was only held in by the coolant hoses. There was no mount, so I've got to make them. The intercooler was the same. It was cable tied to the bumper. Arch liners, cover, there's, oh, I'm going to be here all night. If you're watching a video, leave us a comment and spur me on a bit. I'll keep reading them as I'm working, and there obviously will be a part 2 to this. I want to get it rolling roaded to see what power we've got, make sure that engine's good, and obviously a road test as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a long time in the making, and yeah, I'll leave you now with me carrying on the work. So as always, thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Ta-da.